I have a bit of a different video for you guys today, so we're going to be diving in playing some Elden Ring. Now, as you guys can clearly see, I am on like New Game Plus 4, New Game Plus 5 at this point, but I've had some things on my mind about this game that I haven't exactly been able to pinpoint. I just realized that I'm not actually recording because if you look at my monitor back there, it's the screen just went black, which means I have to reset my PC. So while I reset that, I'm going to talk to you guys because this is my recording time and I refuse to waste any of this. So as many of you probably know, I have had some mixed feelings on Elden Ring. I actually ended up spending my whole morning watching these like 2 to 3 hour critiques on the game to maybe like help me figure out why I'm not enjoying the game the same way that everybody else is. And don't get me wrong, I love Elden Ring and I enjoy the game, and I mean that should be obvious considering I've put in 100 plus hours into the game. However, it feels like the more time I put into it, the less I enjoy it compared to the previous entries. And if you're wondering why I'm standing back here like this, it's because I'm waiting for my PC to turn back on and I'm too lazy to walk back around, sit down, talk to the camera, get back up, come back here. That's too much cardio. But I feel like I've narrowed it down to a couple of things. Now, I made a post in the community tab this morning kind of talking about some of my complaints with Elden Ring and some of the problems that I have with the game. And I feel like I finally found those few critical points as to why I personally can't identify with or love this game as much as everybody else. Now, again, just remember, this is not a bad game. Not even close. I just personally don't enjoy it as much as everybody else does. So just to kind of like reiterate on what I put into the community tab this morning, basically, I was talking about how I have had many times now where I go to start up a new playthrough of Elden Ring, I try to start a new save, and every time I get to that opening part in the game where you open up the door to Limgrave and then you're looking out at the open field, and I kid you not, quite literally every single time that I get to that point, I lose all my motivation to play the game and I end up getting off and just not continuing on with that playthrough. I don't really know why. I just get this overwhelming sense of dread every time that I get to that point because I know what awaits me from that point on a fresh save at least. The way I look at Elden Ring, it's just one long, level-gated, bloated checklist of things that you have to go through every time that you start a new game. And again, before I go any farther with this, please keep in mind, I do love this game. I put in over 100 hours into it. I've done multiple playthroughs at this point. This is a great game. I already know there's going to be a bunch of toxic responses to this video. That's just how the internet is. If you have a different opinion, or if you try to even slightly critique something that everybody else loves, well then you're going to get slaughtered for it. And honestly, I've been doing this long enough. I'm ready for it. I got thick skin. I can take it. But every time that I go to start the game, I just get this overwhelming sense of dread. It's like, do I really want to go through the game again? Because like, for example, if I want to do a Guts Greatsword build, I'm gonna have to go out to Caelid, find the Greatsword location. I'm gonna have to rally up all the incantations that I want to use. I'm gonna have to get my Turtle Shell shield so that I got my stamina regen, because Lord knows, I refuse to do a strength build unless I have this Turtle Shield in my bag for the increased stamina regen. I have to go get the different Ashes of War. I have to do Alexander's Quest, so then I can get the thing that boosts my Ash of War ability. And that checklist feeling is only increased if you go into the game not sure with like what build you want to do, because obviously sometimes in the early game you're like, yeah, I want to do one build, but then you might get past like Stormville Castle and change your mind, and it's like, hey, I'm still early in the game, I can switch up that build. But then like at that point, once you've already been through the game and you know how to maximize builds and make them as efficient as possible, especially if you have like a relative idea as to how to utilize that build to the best of its ability and where the incantations and items and different things are throughout the world that you want to get to optimize the build, it really does just start to feel like a checklist. Now on like a first playthrough, like for example for my first playthrough, I didn't have any problems with that, and most people that have only gone through the game once, they won't have that issue. You go through the game once, you get the things along your journey, you get the different items, and that's really that. You make do with what you got. But for a returning player or somebody going back to the game, it's just like every time that I open up that door to Limgrave, a checklist just starts going in my mind. It's like, okay, what build am I going to use? Where are the items that I need for that? Where are the incantations? Where are the buffs? Where are the Ashes of War? What different dungeons do I need to hit? Do I want to take on all of the Remembrance bosses? Do I want to skip out on Millennia? Do I actually want to go after Radahn? Is that necessary? Which ending do I want to get? Do I want to go for a crazy Common Azure build? Do I want to go for a Faith Spell build? Do I want to go for a Bleed build? And while finding a build that you want to go with is a normal part of an RPG, in Elden Ring it's different because there's so many things that play into optimizing a build that it really just does start to feel like a checklist by the time that you go to start a new save. At that point, you probably just be like, Grotesque, why don't you just do New Game Plus? I mean, look at my inventory. I've platinumed the game. I have a lot. I don't have every weapon in the game, but I have a lot of the weapons that are in the game. And furthermore, I've used so many of these weapons at this point that most of them are either max level or really close to it, so it's easy for me to switch builds. But the problem with New Game Plus in this game is, well, it's balanced terribly. From Software, they just, I don't even know what they happened. All their previous games, New Game Plus was scaled and balanced so well, but in this game, it's an absolute joke. It's this weird dynamic where all the way up until Farum Azula, the game is just a cakewalk. Like, as you guys are about to see here, I mean, sure, the mages are annoying, but I can just go through the game. almost one tap everybody. Like, you see this, I mean, I am using a Colossal Greatsword after all. If I use my incantations as I normally do, like, even by the time that I get up to the boss, I end up, like, 4-tapping some of the bosses. And again, there's gonna be people like, well, Grotesque, you're using a chunky Greatsword, isn't that what you want? And no, I still want there to be at least some semblance of challenge. And you could say, well, then just don't use that stuff. And while that may be a fair argument, on the other hand of it, why wouldn't I use it? If I have access to it, why wouldn't I use it? And the thing is, it's not even a problem of it being overpowered because this only exists for the first 3/4 of the game. So all of like the first 75% of the bosses that you'll encounter in the game up until Farum Azula in New Game Plus are just an absolute cakewalk. They're all a joke. Renala, a joke. Margit, a joke. Godric, a joke. Literally every boss. Morgott, a joke. They have minuscule health pools and they barely do any damage to you along with all the other enemies in the game. But as soon as you get to Farum Azula with like, or not even Farum Azula, I'd say like once you get up to Fire Giant is where it starts. But once you get to Farum Azula and you activate like that last part of the game, then all of a sudden the bosses, they go from being like 5-tap with the Greatsword all the way up to being what they should have been the whole way through. At least for a little while. And then you get to like Godfrey and Radagon and Elden Beast and you know, the health pools are a little questionable. In some ways they almost feel a little overtuned, but I'd rather have them be just slightly overtuned than have them be this simple cakewalk all the way up to that point that it's so mindless and brainless to play. I'd say the bosses that are balanced the best in New Game Plus are probably Malekith and Godfrey. Maybe even Radagon. I'd say Radagon is pretty well balanced in New Game Plus, but like Elden Beast But we got a boss fight coming up right here with the Red Wolf of Radagon, and you guys are about to see just how much damage I do to this thing. Now, granted, I do have some talismans on that give me, like, a bit of an advantage, but the point still stands. You could just obliterate, like, all the enemies in the first bit of this game. So we get up here, right, we pop Flame Grammy Strength, and then along with that, we also want to pop Golden Vow, and considering the talismans I have on, like Alexander's Shard or whatever, you're about to see how much damage we can do when we're fully maxed out with Lion's Claw. So we're not using any summons or anything like that. Let's just see how much damage I can actually do to this boy. And remember, we're on like New Game Plus 5 or something like that right now. In other Souls games, that would be relatively difficult. Well, we're gonna 2-tap him right here. If, you know, if I can actually land my hit. But as you can see, you can 2-tap him like it's nothing. Great enemy felled. That's what it says. It pops up and says great enemy felled. What great enemy did I just fell? That was a 2-tap. That felt like just any other enemy that I fought up to this point. So my point with that is to combat that problem, I was thinking like, look, okay, even though I have all my items in New Game Plus, I might as well just start up a new game then. If I want that difficulty to be back, I'll just go back and play New Game 0. Then that goes back to what I was saying before. Like, as soon as I open up that door to Limgrave, I just think about everything that I don't have in my inventory now and everything that I'm gonna have to go get, everything I'm gonna have to traverse back through, and I honestly just lose all motivation to do it because the best way to get, you know, like levels and equipment and shards and smithing stones and stuff like that, the best way to do that on New Game 0, at least for like the first bit of the game, is to go through the dungeons, because most of the dungeons, they give you access to different things like, oh no, don't come on the elevator with me. Why? I honestly hate this guy. You know what? Can you just... Wait, where am I? Wait, what? What is even happening? He fell to his death? Okay, what just happened right there? My brain just completely fried out. Yeah, once I do start a new game, I just get that, you know, that overwhelming sense of, well, being overwhelmed just when I think about everything that I'm gonna have to go get. Plus, at that point, I don't really have a reason to explore. Like, the main selling point with Elden Ring is that it's a massive open world, you know, there's tons to explore, but at this point, I've done so many playthroughs, the illusion of the open world is cracked, because, I mean, sure, it's an open world, but it's really just, like, a set of levels that you go through, and there's, like, a main boss at the end of each level, and your goal is just to go around the level and get leveled up enough to take on that final boss of the area and then move on to the next. And the main problem with that is, well, the best way to level up, at least in the early game, and get the items that you need to be properly equipped for said bosses is the dungeons. And you want to know what the problem with the dungeons? Control-C, Control-V, not only with the bosses inside of the dungeon, but just the dungeons themselves. They aren't interesting. And sure, there's a few exceptions. Like, there's other dungeons around in the world, like the Carrion Manor, and then you have all the Volcano Manor stuff, and then you have, like, Castle Morn in the beginning of the game. Like, those are, I guess, like, bigger dungeons that aren't your classical mini-dungeons found throughout the world that can help you get some levels, but still, there's only a handful of those throughout the game. So at that point, when it comes to, like, leveling up and get everything that you need, you have to go out and face all the mini-bosses out in the open world, which half of them tend to be recycled. Then you got the dungeons, which them and themselves, the bosses and the dungeons themselves, are recycled like crazy. And while sure you could try to stick to the main path and fight all the main bosses, I mean, I wish you luck. By the time you get to the end of the game, it's literally just going to be a war of attrition with the bosses because you're going to be severely underleveled. You're not going to be doing anywhere near enough damage as you should be. And while some may welcome that challenge, at that point, it's not even really like a real challenge. It's just sort of more like an arbitrary war of attrition. And the only person to blame for it being that way would be yourself at that point, because it wouldn't even necessarily necessarily be that difficult. It would just be that you'd be out dodging the bosses and having to whack on them at least 1,000 times before you get them down, like Godfrey, for example, if you try to just stick to the main path and get to the end of the game. I bet if you stick to the main path of the game, by the time you get to the end, you'd probably only be like level 60, level 70 at best, so yeah, good luck with that. While I'm not necessarily against exploring or going out in the open world, it's just the fact that I've already done it, which I guess that's my point with this. Like, Elden Ring, it's that game for me where I've played it so many times, I know what the game has to offer, and I don't feel like there's much for me to do now. Whereas, you know, oh my, see, look what I'm talking about. I literally hit her once with Lion's Claw, and she's already almost dead. Elden Ring is just that game for me where, like, I've seen what it has to offer, and now I don't really feel like there's much left for me to do. That's basically what I've been trying to say in this video. Like, I've already seen what the game has to offer, so I really don't see any point for me to continue playing it. When it's weird because, like, in all the previous Souls games, Souls 1, 2, 3, Demon Souls, Bloodborne, I mean, I'm not even finished with Sekiro yet. I could see myself replaying Sekiro just because the combat is so satisfying. I felt a reason and even an urge to return to those games and start new saves, new characters, and re-experience it. But with Elden Ring, it's more daunting than anything, and I don't really feel that desire to go back because, again, in New Game Plus, it's too easy, and in New Game Zero, it's too daunting because there's so much to do, and if you try to start up a new game and just stick to the main path, whereas in other games, it would have actually been viable. In this game, you'd really just be setting yourself up for failure, and while it's possible, it's not the best idea. I spent way too long at that point than I would have liked to because there's a lot of other things in the game that I could touch on. Like, I wanted to touch on the bosses in this video, but I feel like I've talked about that enough, so I'll just kind of talk about it briefly. Honestly, just don't like most of the boss designs in this game. Most of them feel way too gimmicky and not really reliant on skill and rather just arbitrary mechanics in the game for you to succeed. Like, for example, you got Moog's Healing Stab, you just gotta drink the flask thing, and then there you go. You can evade that attack successfully as long as you have the right thing in your physic flask. And then Millennia, you gotta do a really weird arbitrary strategy to dodge waterfowl. There's like a few strategies. You can either use Bloodhound Step, or you can block the first hit, dodge through the second, and then just kind of walk backwards for the third, or you can just get naked and start spinning around her and blocking off. I don't know. There's like a bunch of weird strategies for that as well. Then you got Fire Giant, who in himself is entirely an arbitrary gimmick with an artificially inflated health pool for no reason besides to make the fight have a sense of difficulty when the fight itself is not even difficult. The thing that makes it difficult is the fact that you have to survive for like 10 minutes straight in that fight. I just never really jived with that one. And after repeat playthroughs, you know, Fire Giant isn't necessarily as bad as I used to say he was. It's one of those things where he feels like an artificially difficult boss, but that's kind of hard to say because he's barely even difficult in the first place. He's just more of a pain in the ass than anything. And then my final thing that just kind of really doesn't jive the best with me in this game is just the fact that the story doesn't really make much sense to me. Now, before I get those more comments like, oh god, here's another guy talking about the story. No, like, I understand the story. My only question is, why from the start is everybody, it seems very contrived. Like, from the second you wake up, it's just like, go claim the Elden Ring, become Elden Lord. You're just told that, and then, I mean, it happens. There's not much else to it. Like, nothing stands in your way between the beginning of the game until the end besides, like, a few of the mandatory bosses, and otherwise, it's a pretty straight shot. There's nothing that slows you down, nothing that gets in your way. Your plans are straightforward from the beginning. Nothing stops you. Like, I didn't even know why I should care about the story. Why should I care about being Elden Lord? This is a land that my character in the lore has never even been to in the first place. So why should he care about ruling a land that he's never even been to? I mean, if this was like his homeland and then maybe there was like, you know, there was bad stuff going on with the Golden Order, Radagon America, whatever, all the complicated lore stuff, that would make sense, you know, him taking back what he feels like is his and ruling a land that was his, but in this story, it just doesn't make much sense to me because, like, he's not even from this place, so why should he care? Or she, if you made your character a she. And again, from the start, everybody's cheering you on. Like, you know, I liked in the original Dark Souls how everybody was cheering you on from the sidelines, but, you know, your destination didn't seem so set. You weren't guaranteed to get to the end. Like, there was still that sense that your character might not make it, but you still had the people from the side, like, don't go hollow. Whereas in this game, everybody's like, this is what you need to do. This is how you're gonna get there. You're gonna do this. You're gonna become the Elden Lord. And I'm just here like, okay, I guess I'm gonna be Elden Lord. Everybody loves me for some reason. I mean, there was all these other Tarnished that came along, but for some reason, I'm the special one, I'm the chosen one, I'm gonna be the Elden Lord. The game just doesn't give me a reason to care, therefore, I really don't care. There was just something about the previous games, the way that the story was delivered or told, or maybe it was just the stories themselves, they were so much more compelling, and I actually cared about my end goal, but here it's just like, yeah, I'm gonna go become Elden Lord of this random land I've never been to because, yeah, I'm a lord. Furthermore, I just feel a lack of a connection to this world. Like, in all the other Souls games, I felt such a deep connection to the world, the character, like, everything just felt, it felt like a living, breathing world. Not to sound like the typical Ubisoft commercial here, but it felt like a living, breathing world, even though those games weren't open world. And I felt such a deep connection to them. In Dark Souls 1, 2, 3, Demon Souls, I felt such a deep connection to every world, the soundtracks, the characters, everything. Here in Elden Ring, I really don't have that. I don't feel a connection to this world. Like, for me, it's just like, yeah, it's the world, it's the lands between, but I really don't feel any connection to it. Now, granted, I do feel a connection to at least some of the characters. You know, you got, like, Melina and the Blacksmith. Like, they're all cool, and some of the other characters you encounter throughout the game. By the end, I did feel a genuine connection to them, especially to Melina. Like, Melina's awesome. I love Melina. She's one of my favorite From Software characters, and I genuinely cried a bit when she sacrificed herself at the Erd Tree. But outside of the characters, it's just the world lacks the believability, I guess, that the previous Souls games had, and it just... There's like this weird disconnect for me where I don't feel a connection to this world the same way that I did with the other ones. They all knew what they were trying to execute and they did it beautifully. But here it's just like, I don't know, there's something about it. There's that line, there's that fourth wall there where I remember that I'm playing a video game the whole time that I'm playing it. Whereas like with Dark Souls, I felt immersed the entire time and I felt like everything I was doing mattered. But here it's just like, I don't know, it's a world, there's some trees, I don't know, there's some sort of weird disconnect, and I really can't put my finger on it. Maybe it's the fact that the game relies on more video gamey elements that are quite obviously video gamey elements. Video gamey, quote-unquote, elements, we'll call it, isn't necessarily a bad thing in a game, and I have no problem getting immersed and engaged with games like that, but sometimes it's a little ridiculous. Like, you go into these dungeons, for example, and, you know, From Software games, there's always been a sense of believability or, like, realism to them where it's like, okay, this actually makes sense, but when you go into a dungeon and you get into this tiny, cramped room, and all of a sudden you see this like giant bull-type boss with this giant tail, and the only way inside of that room was like this little tiny doorway, and even the path leading to that boss, there was no way that that animal could have fit through there, or that boss, or whatever you want to call it. It's just small things like that that kind of take me out of the world, and the fact that like all the dungeons are the same, and they're just copy and pasted all over the place, and it's the same layouts, and if for some reason there's a boss just waiting at the end of all of these dungeons. Or the fact that there's so many bosses that are just like copied and pasted all over the place. Like even like Margit or Morgott or whatever. It's just obvious that, you know, once you see like Margit for the second time at the beginning of Altus Plateau, and then you fight Morgott, Margit, whatever you want to call it, at the end of Altus Plateau, that, you know, they're just reusing assets and models at that point. I don't know, I'm really conflicted. This is a video where I went into it and I felt like I knew what I wanted to say before recording it, but now that I'm recording it, all of it's just left my brain and I'm just rambling at this point. And that's how I feel with this game, man, because like I want to love it so bad. I love this game. I have so much fun with it. But there's just like small things here and there, and I don't even know what it is, but there's just something that takes away from my enjoyment of the game and my ability to fully enjoy and love the game and rank it among some of the best From Software games. And it genuinely pisses me off. I want to love this game so bad. I want to love it like everyone else does, but I just can't. There's so many like little things for me, and I hate it. I hate it. I'm genuinely getting worked up right now because, like, again, I want to love this game so bad, but I'm not really sure. Right now I'm doing, like, another playthrough on my Xbox. I'm gonna try to stick with it and see if maybe my opinion changes by the end of the game, but I don't know. I think one of these days I might sit down, take some notes, and like, you know, maybe even write up like a mini script of sorts, and then maybe just try to address my thoughts on the game, because there's a few different points that I feel like are still kind of swishing around in my brain. So if that's something you guys would be interested in, please let me know, because like I said, I went into this video feeling like I knew what I needed to say, but now that I'm here, it's all escaping me. I think over the weekend on my work on that, I'll just like jot down a few important points, maybe try to flesh out those ideas, and like get like a 20 to 30 minute video out, just like really going over my thoughts and maybe trying to like finally get to the source of why I can't seem to enjoy this game the same way that everyone else can. But anyway, now I want to hear your thoughts. What are your guys' like thoughts or opinions or theories as to why maybe I'm not enjoying this game as much? Because like obviously we touched on a few of the things in here, like some of the balancing problems and some of the bosses and just my lack of connection to the world in general, but maybe is there like other factors that are playing into why I can't enjoy this as much? I'd really love to hear your guys' thoughts. But anyway, as always, a shout out to the patrons and channel members: Carmen's Fave, Grandma, Liberty Tab, Big Daddy, Matty, Chilubasaurus, Rex, Razak, Polar, Ray, Webster, Lamas, Bianca, Spiritory, Drippy, Middle Alaskan, Peter Magic, Mason Irving, TJY15, Flame 71, Aaron Reynolds, and Unknown. Thank you guys for watching. Have an amazing day. Stay beautiful. I love you all. And remember, don't go hollow. Peace.